In this week's video, I want to discuss melted buildings. Of course, we'll talk about a lot more. Thanks for being here, and welcome. Here I'm looking at 2001 Space Odyssey pictures, and I think this is a metaphor for the truth. We are these monkeys, and we suddenly stumble upon a glorious monolith way beyond the ability of anything we're able to create. And suddenly, we turn on each other. The stronger and more organized begin to turn against the others, begin using tools for acts of war. And I just wanted to mention that a very small channel that I had, it was actually called the Jon Levi channel. I only had 500 subscribers, has been terminated, very strangely. I only had about 6 or 7 videos on there, most of them dealing with off-grid topics. I never had a strike or anything, and they just terminated it. And I was just about to load a short off-grid video showing things I've done around my house, and that's when I noticed the channel was gone. And why? Is off-grid living on their radar? I mean, there's thousands of off-grid channels on YouTube with millions and millions of views, not seeming to be censored in any way. And maybe it's just something that I said in these videos. I have petitioned and sent a request of reconsideration, but really, that is probably the most important thing. Unbelievable to me that anyone should complain about our leaders, expecting them to do something or not do something. And I really think as individuals, as families and small communities, the off-grid idea is the most important. Detaching and still participating in the good parts of the system. But if the system should fail us, we'll be less affected. And I'm sure this could be done in small towns and cities, less oppressive ones, with less oppressive leaders. But while most will protest, or at least in our community, all the flexing of muscle by false authority, and even refuse their medical impositions, they may still continue to buy foods produced by these very same corporations that manufacture poisonous serums. As long as we are dependent on the system, it's easy to be controlled, and I would say we haven't seen anything. Even with all this craziness, I believe we are still free right now to move around and relocate if necessary. And here's a picture of Edinburgh, or Edinburgh, just an old world pic. Everything original and preserved and absolutely beautiful. And this thing has something to do with water. And here we can see the canals and much underground engineering here. And this is showing some ornamentation in some Cambodian temple. And over here we just see some part of our electrical grid, and we see a great resemblance. This was shared by IRS Media, and he was just combing the California highway, and he found many ruins right off the highway, and most of them overgrown, and yet are these pockets of survival. Of course, keeping in mind that mountains, not all, but many, could be melted buildings, plasmified, along with water and events that we know nothing of that occur during resets. And here again, absolutely fascinating. Off the California highway, I'm not sure what, I think 1. Here's coordinates. And look at this. This should be some historical site. And no, just ignored. And I was just taking screenshots from his video, and he was using the Google tool. Here's some crazy structure that he was showing. And here again, some more of these bricks. And I think these were in Santa Monica. Here, another look. Now, would anybody do this? Would anyone just brick this up? Perhaps. And if anyone can go to these coordinates, and I am pretty convinced that this is the remains of a structure. Here we can see her skeleton, or the core. And this is what's missing in our community. It's just cutting into these things, peeling away the mud, or as some would say, volcanic ash. And I don't know, the building could have melted, creating a veil or a rock curtain over the top, or it could also have been covered with a volcanic ash that I proposed in a video long ago as one of a dozen different mud flood theories, which I'll eventually carry over to other theories, like the melted building theory. This could be covered, it could have been rocked by water and mud in some kind of tsunami, but clearly the building or the levels have collapsed, pancaked, and to me this would require some great heat, as we saw on that day in September in New York. And so here, a collapsing, a pancaking, and a dustifying. But again, many theories, I don't know. I wasn't there. But most people, certainly in the mainstream, aren't even going to look at something like this. It's not even on the table as anything but dirt and layers, billions and billions of years of layers. And it's tough when it just looks muddy, just little holes like some Swiss cheese. But here, for example, it gets a little better. Now again, we see these same kind of brick section, and perhaps these are newly added by the Native Americans. But otherwise, the rest is the remains of a melted building, in my opinion, and possibly covered in ash as well. And this is on my to-do list, the Bandelier National Monument in New Mexico. One of my favorites. Little rooms inside, and no way are Native Americans just carving things like this out in a primitive fashion. It's more realistic that this is the remains of an advanced building that is in absolute ruin. Just a fragment remaining, just barely, the slightest trace remaining. And I do think the natives popped these rock curtains out. I'm sure what happened is they realized a few of them were hollow, and they began just punching them out and making shelter out of them. But they are not responsible for carving this out. They wouldn't have done things like this up here, or these incomplete sections. No reason. And many parts of this park are off limits, and I think a structure like this was probably made by the Park Service. Very recent, with its fresh wood here. And this leads me to some photos that I wanted to share by the Wise Up channel. I took about a dozen screenshots from one of his videos. This is not one of them. And I just wanted to discuss them. I had no conclusions, similar to what we're looking at here. I'm only certain of what it's not. Here on the inside we see archways and a beautiful floor, and similar to what we see in Cappadocia. The only difference is there's even more preservation in Cappadocia. Cappadocia is a perfect example of this melted building theory. The top here just cooked like a marshmallow. We've all burnt a marshmallow and how it puffs up, and yet so much of the building remaining. And these little rooms and windows, and who knows what this structure looked like. But similar to what we were just looking at, where they want to tell us primitive Native Americans carved it all out, they want to tell us the same thing here in Turkey. And again, having a very similar feel, but yet having a lot of preservation, as you can see up here. Look at the ring around this cylindrical remain of some kind of tower, and here we can just see how it was flowing, and no doubt a building that has melted like wax, and yet thank God some was preserved. Again, this is very, very nice up here, this example. Clearly anything but natural, showing signs of being built. And here again, the impressions are left for us. Right angles, archways, as we see here. This could be popped out. Here another archway that could be popped out. Here an opening leading up into another level. And here are some of the best examples. This is as fine as it gets. Or actually in Petra would probably be as fine as it gets. This is very Petra-esque. And you see the beautiful columns that have cracked off and still affixed to the top. And you can see the beautiful structure that it was, and now has this burnt marshmallow around the top of it, just dripping down. And I believe that somebody has popped these out, probably got in through the bottom and popped these windows out from the inside. And here in the background you see more buildings, all marshmallowed at the top. So now we just reverse engineer. We just walked these examples from less recognizable now to almost absolute certainty that this was a structure. And it's been hit hard from the top and from the bottom, seeming to be cooked from the top, but having been sucked clean from the bottom, as if everything was just being sucked up from the ground. And we can get a good look at this ground sucking at the Hovenweep National Monument, which is found in southern Utah, bordering Colorado as well. And we see these ruins, and we see signs of absolute melting and destruction. But many of these structures appear to have the earth around them completely displaced. Sometimes towers resting on little stumps like we see here, as if everything around it has either been washed away or sucked away. And this is something that's been a mystery to me for some time. I've actually physically been here and plan on returning. And here was something shared by Paul Cook. Again, very similar. Pockets of preservation surrounded by a complete disfiguration, things like this, and played off as primitive. So here are the Wise Up photos, and he's outlined these portions of engineering that remain. And I don't believe that he subscribes to the melted building idea. He, as of recently, seems to believe that these buildings are covered with volcanic ash. And again, I think that could be a possibility. I'm not here to tell you what to think, and I'm not quick to decide or make an absolute conclusion for myself. I think there's many ideas on the table, and I appreciate everyone discussing all these different ones. Regardless, I think all the different angles in this community would agree that this is the remains of something advanced, and not just some primitive carvings done by primitive people. At some point, Wise Up was talking about a lot of these structures being made of wood, but sometimes he talks about steel, and I believe they could be wood in some cases, and in other cases, steel and concrete and everything that we use today, just in complete ruins. Here again, he was showing an example in the Ukraine. So I just think this really ties in well with everything that we've just been looking at. And regardless of what you think happened, I think everyone can agree that these are the remains of structures, whether they've been covered in volcanic ash or plasmified, anything but primitive. This is super advanced, even in its complete ruined state. And you see the block lines have just fused from such a heat. And yet this structure must have been diesel. Maybe this thing was made of thick metal or something. And here again, without the red, and clear as could be. Nobody's coming up here and carving this point here. And look at the beveling around the door. But this thing seems to have buckled right here. Just the heaviness, the mass. And yet here would have been an opening and a platform that has just tilted on its side and melted in on itself. And here again, I think he's done a great job of highlighting the unnatural portions. And here again, Cappadocia, and more Cappadocia. And this is what I'm talking about. This is my favorite. When we look at the inside, and this showing us that this is a cast structure at one point, that this is a cast concrete, which would require tons of steel and reinforcement. And here we can even see the steel poking through, it seems like. Just beautiful. And not a mountain, not carved. Come on. With this honeycomb. Here's another one he shared. And some other ones. I just love this. Like a skyscraper, reminding me of something I would draw. Just a building in ruins showing slit windows. And I love this one. Just a mega structure rendered into a blob. And here in China, I had an old friend from Boston named Jim, and he would say China, add an R to the end of it, and I liked it. China, here we are in China. And you see how they've built little wooden windows, just availing themselves of this engineering. Here Wise Up says this looks like it would have been a water wheel, and yes, some kind of tech that has now just been sandwiched into this mess. And again, all these windows are waiting to be popped out. I'm sure it was a great pastime to the people of the past. And I look forward to finding one out in the Southwest Desert and popping it out. And what it seems to be is these structures are marshmallowed, burnt, crispy marshmallowed on the outside. And the inside is completely preserved like this. This is so beautiful. Look at this. Nobody carved this. This is pure preservation. And here it looks like the support columns have just melted perhaps. And somehow it's holding up nicely. And here again, and I believe Wise Up was saying this was metal, like it looked like rust. And it does. And this is a gorgeous picture. So beautiful I can't even comment. And look at this. Unbelievable. And I think we had this stuff in the Southwest as well. I think all the beautiful national parks are actually just cover-ups. And before they let tourists in, they either bombed or covered up a lot of this, making it look natural. And next I'd like to go to India. But real quick, this is in Utah, and I think this is a cover-up. And here I wanted to show a few pictures from Praveen Mohan. Many of you have probably seen his stuff. And just mind-blowing. He was showing this column, which looks like a little cathedral in India. It just looks like a little cathedral. And we could discuss the artwork and so many different aspects, but what I wanted to talk about was how it spins. This massive, massive column spins, indicating that it is a machine and that these buildings are indeed machines. And it had ball bearings, and it would have been this temple here, the ancient Chinna Keshava temple in Karnataka, the rotating pillar. And this thing was amazing. And we've all seen these pictures of these columns in India. That's amazing that it lets me highlight a picture that it knows. Unbelievable. And here we can get a look at this rotating pillar. And if you have a chance, check out his video. One of the parts of the pillar, I think this top one, still rotates, having some ball bearings, which he was saying were stone. But truly, I think, of course, it was metal. They were metal ball bearings. They wouldn't make some intricacy like this and put stone ball bearings that are just going to turn to powder eventually. But nevertheless, the bearings had seized, especially at the bottom. And this thing was actually serving as a map, he was saying. All these are like miniature parts of the temple, beyond comprehension what's going on in India. In my opinion, maybe there's nothing more advanced in the realm than the things we see in India, at least preserved. And why is it so important to control us? And not just control us now, in this time period, but if we believe any part of our history, seeming to always have been controlled. Most understanding of the nature of this realm being kept secret. and the people being taught and running a program. And you can be controlled in certain ways. And I think to a certain extent some control is necessary. And I think most people respect one another. It is only those in control, ironically, that do not respect the people. But what they will never be able to control is your mind. And the mind is the most powerful thing. And they will try to control the mind by filling it with obscure ideas, filling it with necessities that are unnecessary, and you'll run around in circles and essentially be controlled. And many feel hopeless, as if they can't change anything. And it is my belief that we can change things with our minds. We are all active participants in this dream, and most things seem fixed, but we see exceptions to everything. And what would this place become if everyone realized they were able to participate? Well, I think that's it for today. I have a organic dark roast coming soon, and I hope you all have a blessed week. Thanks for all your support. I love you all, and God bless.